Andy. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me and see me okay? Super. Well, thank you very much for having me. Like I said, it is the graveyard shift, so I appreciate it's a challenge this time of day, isn't it? So I'm going to try and keep it as lively as possible whilst talking about money and death. So my name's Eleanor Stead. I'm the Deputy National Giving Advisor for the Church of England. So myself and my team work in the National Church institutions, but we work through our diocesan colleagues in the Giving Advisor network, and we're very much focused at a parish level. So I'm in Bristol, but we do a lot of travelling out and about, and my area of specialism, which is legacies, is very much focused at a parish level. I do have the door open because I'm lucky enough to work in my lovely husband's workshop shed, but it's a beautiful sunny day here in Bristol. So if you can hear aeroplanes, which you probably can, or birds, it will all add to the atmosphere, I'm sure. So the session won't last more than an hour. I'll keep coming in and out of the PowerPoint as and when I can feel people sort of dropping off. We have a Q&A session at the end, but please do ask questions as we go along. Like I say, I'll pause at different points to reflect and hear feedback. Do use the chat facility as well if you want to make a point or you have a question but you don't want to interrupt. I'll keep coming back to that. And my details will be at the end, as well as Andy. So if you've got any specific questions that come to you later on, then do feel free to get in touch. But for now, I'll just share the old PowerPoint. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, super. Lovely. All right. So in terms of an agenda, I just wanted to talk a bit about why legacies are important. I mean, you're all here, so I figure you do feel it's important. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time trying to convince you otherwise. And then just some 3 simple steps in terms of how you can encourage legacies. Very simple, very basic, very foundational. But I think we've got an hour, so let's make the most of it and actually give you some practical things that you can go away and do now. And then opportunity to ask some questions and to reflect, and we'll hear a bit about the legacies that have been received within the diocese as well, if that sounds all right. So in terms of why I think you should encourage gifts and wills or legacies, a legacy is simply a gift that is left in a will. It's a bequest, often left to a charitable organisation, and obviously our churches are charities. So legacies are a financial opportunity. They're an incredible source of income to parishes across the Church of England. So we receive around £65 million in legacy gifts, and that's around 4,000 legacies each year. So it's a total of around 7% of total voluntary income. Not a huge amount, but 60% are unrestricted. They provide seed funding for capital appeals, for missional projects. They can often be a source of regular income for hundreds of years. They are really significant in terms of future sustainability. And that's not just in the church, that's in the charity sector as well. They are incredibly valuable sources of income. And they're part of our Christian giving. It is a Christian gift. It's a gift. It's a way of saying thank you. Therefore, they should be celebrated and appreciated. Often the approach is sometimes to keep legacy separate. But legacies are often a lifetime of a culmination's worth of gifts, love, support. They're very emotional, very nostalgic gifts often. So people will leave to their local church or a church because it holds a very sentimental role within their life. So it's often churches where there've been weddings, baptisms, funerals, locality, somewhere where somebody's grown up, a cathedral because it's been a source of inspiration or it's been part of the scenery or the landscape or the locality. They're really special gifts. So when we're thinking about legacies, it's the same as when we're thinking about all other types of giving. It's just another way to give. And because of that, they're life affirming. They are about the life of the individual. As I said, they're nostalgic. They're often about people looking back. They leave gifts in wills when they're alive. They're their living wishes. If they're not leaving them when they're dead, that's too late. So it is life affirming. It's something that we can celebrate and have conversations about with the living. And then finally, legacy fundraising is very gentle. It's often just about making the information available. letting people know that we are charities, our churches are charities, we can receive gifts and wills, we welcome them, and that if people want to find out further information, they can do so here. So nobody's marched out onto the street with a clipboard and a pen. It's very gentle, it's drip drip, it's just making sure that the message of legacies is there, because people will want to leave gifts and wills, have conversations about gifts and wills at different points in their lives, varying. So the information always needs to be there. And that's why I think you should encourage gifts and wills. Has anybody got any feedback or thoughts or comments on that before I carry on? You can speak. I'll give you a moment to draw.
Don't forget to use the chat facility as well.
What, sorry?
No, I'm just saying, just remind them to use the chat facility if they prefer.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. So how to increase legacy giving in your parish? The first thing you have to do is you have to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I'd say legacies are the area of giving in the church where we're most reticent to ask about. So have a think. What percentage of people do you think are asked whether they'd like to include a gift in their will, or they've considered leaving a gift in their will? Just have a think. Think it's high? Think it's low? About 15%. So about 15% of Anglicans have been asked to support their church by leaving a legacy. So compared to charity standards, when surveyed, it's around 88% of people who've been asked to support their favourite charity by leaving a legacy. So the main thing you can do is ask, is to communicate, is to make sure that people know that we can receive legacies, we welcome legacies, and this is how they're left. So that's the first step that you can take away from your PCC, is just make sure that there's an ask. It doesn't have to be a direct ask, it's an ask through literature. It's saying thank you, which inevitably leads to an ask. It's just making sure that people are aware legacies are left to local churches. Sounds simple? Maybe. But that's the first steps that you can take. Okay, in terms of legacy income, I've mentioned it already, but it's always useful, I think, to just draw attention to what's going on in the sector. So legacy income is incredibly important to the charity sector. It often makes up around 50 to 60% of total voluntary income for household name charities. This is an example of some of the most common and most popular. It tends not to move that much because once household name charities have got a grip on the sector, they've got a grip. But you know, it's for very worthwhile and important causes, and causes close to people's hearts, as you can see. In terms of the Church of England, right on the end, so the big tall purple line is voluntary income, and then the smaller maroon colour is the legacy income. So still, a decent amount, legacy income 65 million, but there's a much weaker correlation in terms of the percentage of people who are giving regularly and leaving legacies. Obviously, a huge variety of people can leave legacies, but like I said, it's often a culmination of a lifetime's worth of support. It's often somebody who's been involved in the charity or for a long time. So there's a huge opportunity to grow legacy income. I'll come to you in a sec, Nigel, thank you. But equally, there's a weaker correlation. Again, simply, I think, because we just don't talk about legacies as much as these other charities. Nigel, did you have a comment?
Can I just check the graph? Is that would indicate 65,000? The y-axis is thousands. Should it be millions?
It should be millions. Yeah, Nigel, you got.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll change it for the next one. Thank you. So a huge amount of money. It's about 3 billion to the charity economy. So I always just think it's really interesting to see that lots of legacies are being left. I'd also say that the number of people who are giving regularly to their local church will also be leaving legacies to these other charities. And it's not about redirecting those gifts. It's about saying, look, we recognise that people do leave legacies. Lots of people are leaving legacies. On average, they'll leave 3 legacies in their will. So again, just saying, if people are remembering their favourite charitable cause, they're also remembering their favourite Christian charitable cause their local church. And I'll stop in a second, but I just thought I'd show you Lincoln's legacy income as well. Hopefully this graph's right, Nigel. So in terms of legacy income over the last 5 years, you really need to see a sort of 10-year trajectory, but 2021 was a particularly high year because you had a number of, we had 500,000 legacies, I think, and 200,000 legacies. It's, you know, it's a decent amount. It's around 82 legacies that are left each year, around £1.6 million on average in terms of annual legacy income, and the average gift size is around 20,000, which is actually quite high. So they're making a difference at a parish level within the diocese, but also nationally. So I'll just stop sharing for a minute. I'll give you a moment to digest and then see if there's any questions, comments, anything like that coming out. Oh, 3 new messages. 12%, yeah. Anybody got anything to share? Any questions, comments? Oh, Nigel, you're back again.
Yeah, you said that the average legacy is, I think you said around about 20,000 for Lincoln. And you indicated that that was high against, or higher than nationally. What is the national figure?
Very good. It's around 13,000.
All right, so it is really significantly up on that.
Yeah. So off the top of my head, that's usually because you receive more residual legacies. That's percentages of estates, higher value, or yeah, I mean, the number 82 is actually lower than the national average. The national average is 110. You're always looking for the number to be higher because the number of gifts indicates that more gifts are being left. But we're lower than average of population in our diocese. It'll be dominated by the places like London and Southwark, I imagine. Thank you, Nigel. Anything else from anybody? No, you're happy? Yes, we're happy. Okay, let's go back. No, don't want to share that. Oh. So in terms of the legacies that are being left, sizable figures, sizable sums, and opportunities to grow this area of giving. It's always worth pausing and just thinking about who are the people who are leaving legacies, because you can look at the figures, but actually it's all about the people behind the numbers. It's a really wide range of individuals who might leave a legacy to a local church. So you've obviously got those, the closest donors, as it were, i.e. the regular givers, the worshipping congregation. They're often the most likely people to leave legacies. You've also got church volunteers, groups, societies. Your church might have a sort of unique selling point, might be famous for its peal of bells or have a very nice tower. And you might also have a friends group who are very actively engaged and involved. But then you've also got the community. A lot of legacies are left by community, quite often local or former residents, local or former members of the church as well. You've also got the church users, the service users, the kind of missional, people who really enjoy the seasonal services, for example, or the seasonal community events. You've got the wider extended family, so essentially people who really loved your church because their daughter got married there, or because their father had a wonderful funeral, or they've got family who are buried in the graveyard. And then you might have, like I said, a unique selling point. You might get a lot of visitors or tourists who like to leave legacies for a particular sort of physical fabric element of your building. So there's lots. I've heard a lot of stories of people who leave legacies because, they liked the couple who were really involved at church and they used to walk their dog for them, or they went to the Christmas meal that the church put on every year and they didn't have any nearby family, or it's amazing the stories that come out of people who've left legacies. So when you're thinking about who you're communicating the legacy message to, it really is wide and it's broad. And that's why I'll talk about not only thinking about how you communicate to your congregation, but also making sure you've got information and literature available inside the physical building, making sure that it's If you've got local solicitors that you have any relationships with, they're aware that legacies can be left to your church and what the wording is. And then also information on your website, because a lot of people who will have moved away or who don't live in the area and visited your church 20 years ago and suddenly think, oh, I love that church. They will do that by the website or by calling me. So always have information on your website. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I just want you to have a think if there are any legacies that have been left to your church that you're aware of, or maybe your previous church. And if anybody just wants to share their stories, that's always the nicest part of this session. So I'd like to make time for it. So anybody received a legacy in their church, recently, historically, do share. It'd be lovely to hear. This is where I don't have anyone lined up and I just sit here awkwardly in silence, but there's always legacies received. It's just who's brave enough to speak first.
I'll
Nigel.
be brave.
Oh,
We've received several recently, but they seem to always attach some sort of restriction or some sort of wish that it can only be somebody's name needs to be put onto a new piece of double glazing or that sort of thing, which can be difficult if you've just redone the double glazing. So yes, there seems to be a lot of restrictions, and actually getting the treasurer to actually understand that it is monies that is available to spend and not just the rainy day slush fund, which needs to be squirreled away for when the roof falls in, which is important, but yes.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, so many good points there. So with the restrictions, I mean, like I say, 60% are unrestricted, which is actually higher than I thought when I first started. But I think my advice would always be the more information you have available in terms of why legacies left for general purposes are important, who you can contact to have a conversation with to try and avoid those restrictions. I mean, if somebody wants to restrict the gift, they're going to restrict the gift. But if you can do it through a letter of wishes, which is non-legally binding, if the language used can be as generic as possible, and also if they're aware that, the glazing project has finished, the better, really, because nobody sits around and thinks, oh, I'm going to make this really difficult for the PCC to spend. How can I ruin their day? It's often they don't know what legacies are going to be left for or used. So they think, oh, I'll be really helpful and I'll specify it. And then, there won't be any bloodshed at the next PCC. So again, the more examples of stories where legacies have been left can inspire people to think, oh, that's how they use them. Oh, lovely. Oh, that would be really nice. And then the treasurer spending them and not saving them for a rainy day, I think, and again, that's a fear. That's sometimes why legacies are restricted. But people leave money because they want it to be spent. They want it to go towards significant projects. So I always say, if you've got a legacy, spend it. If it's unrestricted, of course, and you've got something worthwhile to spend it on. Because it will show other people what the sort of things their legacies could achieve. But secondly, it could cause an issue with regular giving. It could sort of say, well, you've got all that money set on the account. And although somebody's generosity is not an excuse for your own, actually, oh, we haven't got it anymore. Sorry, we spent it, is always helpful. So thank you, Keith. Thanks for raising that.
The other aspect of that, of course, is that from experience, it's always been to do with fabric.
Right.
And never to do with mission, which is always a concern. Yeah,
absolutely. But wouldn't it be amazing if we would receive more legacies for mission? What opportunities that would open up. Thank you. All right, Nigel, over to you. Thanks for waiting.
We've had 2 legacies in the last 18 months or so. The first for £5,000 was from a former treasurer and a very long-standing reader in our parish, and being a former treasurer, he knew not to make it restricted, and we are applying that for improving our communications, which is something his daughter, who is also a reader in our parish, is fully behind. So that was a clear decision, and we'll hopefully soon have a new website one which does us justice. The other one is very recently we've received £25,000, again unrestricted, and we are going to have to decide how to use that wisely to further the mission of the church.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Nigel. Oh, I love that story about the reader and the communications. That's fab. Simon.
Yeah, we've we've just received a £20,000 legacy from a long-standing member of the congregation who's just passed away, and the restriction is it needs to bless the people of Waddington, which is quite a nice restriction to have, really. So that is the only restriction we have. So that's really good. But in my old parish, where Kate now is, and the reason I would joke to her that I recognise the bookshelves is because that the rectory is where I used to the vicarage is where I used to live. So in my curacy, but there've been some legacies left there, and one was quite significant, about £65,000, which is really good. But what that's enabled is exploration of installing a toilet and other things, which has been a long-standing desire for the church, and it's the church is beautiful, and it's where everyone wants to be baptized, have their weddings, and the current toilet is at the back of the garage at the vicarage, and I mean, Kate's blessed now because she's got a new driveway, so at least people won't slip and trip down the potholes that were at the bottom of the drive when I lived there. But what it does do is it allows that kind of hospitality welcome thing, and hopefully provide the parish with something. But that was a really good blessing. But the money wasn't restricted. I think it was free to use. However, but there was another experience where there was a piece of land left to the church,
right,
and there are restrictions on that. But some you can't build houses on it, for example. But it can be used to bless the church and for the church's work. But there are restrictions on what could be built or not. So there's challenges there. But so there's a couple of another example of legacy, I suppose.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and there are inevitably complicated legacies which are left and that require additional legal advice, and absolutely have conversations with the diocese. But I love that. I love the restrictions to bless the people of Waddington. That's amazing. And the other 65,000 that's being used for hospitality and improvements facilities. Quite often it can be the seed funding or give the congregation the confidence to be able to embark on a fundraising project that's been long overdue, but will make such a change and such a difference to day-to-day life. So thank you for sharing those. Okay, anybody else? I've got some lovely stories there. I'm happy. Okay, I'll crack on so we can finish early. That's fine. Right, back to the old presentation. Lovely. Right, thank you for sharing those, and really interesting to hear that a lot of them were from long-standing members of the congregation and the worshipping congregation, and indeed those serving on the PCC. So fantastic to hear. Okay, so some practical things that you can do. So I've already said the first thing to do is ask. So let's think about 3 very simple things you can do in 2023 on how to ask. The first is always to just embed legacies in anything that you're doing with giving. So you will already have some kind of campaign or structure or review system for giving. You will have different ways that people can give, just making sure that legacies are there. Secondly, like I said, just making sure that the information is in the right places that people might be looking. So thinking about inside the church, locally, those places that people might be going to write their wills, and also on your website if anybody's coming to look at your church and try and do a good old Google and find the information they need. And then finally, I'm just going to talk about the free online will writing service that we have. We've partnered with Fair Will. The diocese has some free wills to use, and this can be a great incentive for engaging people with the first will that they write. So particularly baptism and marriage couples, that's often when people write their first will, but also people who have been thinking about updating their wills. And this is a free offering, which we are a charity. Most charities offer it, so it's lovely to be able to finally provide that service. So in terms of embedding legacies in a giving campaign, first thing you can do in terms of asking, just embed it. Every giving campaign should start with a thank you. They often start with a thank you. So the example I'm going to provide you with is just putting it in your annual thank you letter. If you have a thank you letter that you start your giving campaign with, this is just an example of how you can nicely slot it in, and it provides that drip message. So we're writing to everybody to thank you for your support. Thank you to everyone who's given in the weekly collection, monthly via the parish giving scheme, one-off donations given to the organ fund, and thank you to everyone who's included a gift in their will. All of these gifts help us to continue our mission and ministry to the church. So it's really simple, but if it's in there and it's on a template, I guarantee in 5 years' time, it will still be there. So just reviewing any giving literature, or anytime you're creating any giving message, anytime you're providing a case study or an example of where gifts have made a difference, just think about legacies. And that's it. It's just about embedding legacies in any place you're talking about giving. And a good place to start is with the thank you letter. That's it. That's all I'm asking you to do. Oh, Simon, you've got a question or a comment. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but as a newish treasurer, I'm faced with the fact that we don't seem to have sent out thank you letters for some considerable years. And I'm just thinking about the timing of this in terms of, I send the first thank you letter out that they've seen for years, and I'm also asking them to contribute. I just wonder how you think that would go down.
Of course. So thank you for that. Really interesting point. So a thank you letter is often quite sort of annual thank you letter. So if you have a giving campaign, it's usually, usually falls around harvest time, September, October, or if not around Christmas or the new year. So if you haven't sent one out for a while and you're thinking about sending one out, I think that's a good time. I think you could start off potentially just saying thank you to all giving. Or, we've got some new information on our website about the different ways that you can give. And as long as it's set within a context, and it always starts with, you're thinking about the journey of a giver. They give once, then they give regularly, then they give large gifts, also they gift aid, and then they leave a gift in their will. So as long as it's not the first thing that you're asking for, then it sits nicely within the different ways that you can give. But I'm sure Andy and Hugo could help in terms of if you've got a template and you want to run it past them. That'd be great. But yeah, don't just ask them for legacies. But if you're talking about giving in general and you're building that picture, making sure legacies is in there eventually.
Thank you.
Super. I commend you coming to this so early in your treasury. Thank you. Okay, the second is making information available in literature. So I've just provided some generic website content here. If you have a church website or a group church website, and hopefully you've got something around how people can give. It can be quite complicated. 99% of my inquiries are just trying to figure out what the postcode is of a church, if it has a postcode, who is the proper receiving body, which St Mary's is there? There's 700 St Mary's. So, which diocese is that St Mary's that somebody's come to them with? So just have the information there. And like I said, make sure that there's information about giving in general, and that legacies has a place on there. Providing a will writing clause, the wording is fantastic because it just avoids any of those, I don't know what to put in the will, or no, a church is not a charity. You're addressing those two key Christian myths straight away. You can also include information about the Fair Will free online will writing service, which I'll mention in a minute. And also really important to just have a contact name. So people tend to like to have a conversation about legacies, or at least know that they can, or they can pass the details on to their solicitor who's going to have a conversation. So great to have somebody in your church who's a point of contact. If you don't have someone in your church, you can put Andy or Hugo down. Worst case, you can put, my name down, or the National Church Legacy website. But just have somebody that someone can have a comfortable conversation with. But it's a bit of a faff to set up, but once it's there, it's there. And also, if you've got a bit of a complex structure, if you've got multiple churches in your parish or what have you, then you want to address those issues now, because if they're complicated for you, they're definitely going to be complicated for Joe Bloggs on the ground. So just thinking about what information is out there virtually in terms of how somebody would leave a legacy. And then what information is available in your church. So leaflets, bookmarks, posters, getting some leaflets into any solicitor firms that you have in the area. You know, the amount of dogs for the blind, what's it called? Dogs Trust, Dogs for the Blind. Dogs for the Blind?
Guide dogs for the blind?
Blind dogs. Is it called Blind Dog? I'm having a
Dogs.
complete meltdown.
There's no point in the dogs being blind, I guess, is there?
There's no point in the dogs being blind, is there? Anyway, that one. Always leaflets there in solicitor offices that I go into. I think they just do like a round robin of all the solicitor firms in the country. But just get the information there, explain to local legal representatives that your church can be left wills and this is how. All literature is free on the CPO website. I've included the URL there. And again, I'll send these slides around. But it takes a couple of weeks to arrive, but it's there. And then you're just making sure that people know that it's there. So just pointing to it, maybe in the notices on Sunday, or again, if you're doing a giving campaign, making sure the literature's there. But it won't fly off the shelves. I'm not going to lie to you, but you know, somebody might pick up the odd leaflet and leave you 20,000. So it's definitely worth doing. And that's it. Just keeping an eye on it, maintaining it, drip, make sure the information's up to date. If the leaflets look like they've gone down a bit, just ordering some more and placing it. Like I said, it's not a difficult way to fundraise. It's drip, but it's just about being consistent. Andy, yes.
If I would put the link in the chat there, just for the link for the place to order these resources from.
Super. Thank you very much.
We'll be sending that around in an email as well, though, so don't worry if you lose it.
Brilliant. Lovely. Fab. And we are working on some new materials that will be available in the autumn. But for the moment, you know, these are all accurate and up to date. They're just a bit purple, let's be honest, a bit purple. But, you know, if you want to create your own leaflets, super. But something is better than nothing. That's always my approach. Okay, and then the final sort of call to action, other than making sure that you're asking, making sure that information and literature is available, that any sort of giving campaign has legacies included in it, is that you can offer a free online will. So for the last decade, I've been hounded by parishes about, it would be great if we had a free will writing service. All the other charities have got one, why haven't we? Well, I got you one. I every year put a proposal to the board and I got some money and it's there, and not many people are using it. So I might lose it. So please, it's here. It's for anyone who wants to leave, who wants to write their will. There's no obligation to leave a legacy. It's online, which I think is throwing some people slightly. They didn't ask me for that, but COVID, when I got the funding, online seemed appropriate in 2020. So it's part of our Christian stewardship to encourage people to write a will. It's in the Book of Common Prayer. You know, write a will for the better discharging of your conscience, for the quietness of your executors. It recognises that you feel better after writing your will, making sure your loved ones are provided for. It's much easier to, well, you can't administer an estate where there's no will. And you should be you should be reminded to put your affairs in order whilst you're in good health. So, you know, it's encouraging, again, it's that life affirming message. Actually, this is something that you should be thinking about throughout your life. I'm mid-30s and I'm on my 5th will. I've just had another child. I say just 2 years ago. I'm still waiting to update my will, but you know, it's on my to-do list myself. So it's a relevant message, and people often update their wills when there's a significant life change or a financial circumstance, and often the church is involved in those life changes. So it's a good opportunity to just take stock and let people know that this service is available. So we partnered with Fair Will. Every will that's written is checked by Fair Will's legal team. They are very simple, straightforward wills. If your affairs are complex, this isn't the route for you. But generally, we find in the charity sector that the people who use online free wills don't either have a real sense of what they're worth, what their estate's value is, and also tend to have very simple affairs. If you've got more complex affairs, you've probably already got financial external advice. What's great about this process is that it is designed, it is bespoke for the Church of England. So we have gone through it step by step and identified to make sure it's appropriate for our charity's needs. Therefore, there are 2 asks in there. Remember what I said? The best way to encourage legacies is to ask. There are 2 direct asks in here. First ask is, would you like to leave a residuary legacy to your local church? There's then a link and API to a church near you where you can start typing in the name of your church and it will find it for you. And then when you get further down the line, but you can say no, it's fine. And then as you get further down the process, would you like to leave a pecuniary legacy to your charity? So a cash sum, again, linked to an API, you can look in a church near you, you can say no. There's a voucher code that you get at the beginning of the process. So when you get to the end, you go to checkout, you just type in the voucher code. I've created a unique one for Lincoln, but there's a generic C of E one as well. And then you get your will for free. Now then, the reason that's so important is because how many people do you think go to their solicitors and are asked not once, but twice, if they'd like to leave a legacy to their local church? You know, never. If you're lucky, you might get charity. So we're finding that 1 in 4 people who writes an online will through using these voucher codes is including a legacy, and 97% of them are leaving a residuary legacy. That's huge, absolutely massive. So in less than 2 years, we've seen £1 million pledged to local parish churches through people using the online free will writing service. Massive. You're not a legacy nerd like I am, but it is big, trust me. So this is a fantastic thing to promote and encourage and make people aware of, that it's there if it's of interest to you. And like I said, there's no obligation to leave a legacy. If you, as a church representative, want to test out this system and see if it's right, please go ahead. It's for you as it is for everybody else. In terms of promoting this service, again, it's just about making people aware. So if you're updating any web content that you have about giving, just includes a little bit about fair will. I ask you not to put the voucher code in, but just put the URL, because what can happen is that trolls can grab the code, code here. So just put the URL and it will take you straight through to the homepage, which shows the code. And then just make sure, that's the mechanism really. Make sure it's paired with the message, why do legacies make a difference? Why are they important to your church? And that's kind of all you really need to do. Just need to make sure that people are aware of it. I've included a little Facebook post here, but any legacy stories that you have, that's the biggest motivator for people leaving a legacy, is hearing about the difference that it can make. The second biggest motivator is just being asked. So if you can do both of them, you're winning. And that's it really. That was all I was going to talk about. I've got some practicalities in terms of some of the legal questions that get asked by me. Is it useful to hear about those? Please
I think so, yes.
I think so, Andy. So you don't need to know this, but it's sometimes useful to know. But like I said, it's always helpful to have somebody who can answer questions if there's a potential legator who wants to have a conversation. But hopefully you've established by now that all PCCs are charities, they hold charitable status, and the proper receiving body of any legacy is the Parochial Church Council. So I would always like to see the legacy left to the Parochial Church Council. All charitable gifts are exempt from inheritance tax, and that's regardless of whether or not your church has a registered charity number. The only reason you have a registered charity number is because your income is over the threshold, which is 100,000, and therefore you are required by law to register with the Charity Commission. So if you do have a registered charity number, make sure it's clearly communicated in any communications. If you're setting out the wording that you've got the registered charity number there. You can also state that we hold charitable status, however, we are not registered with the Charity Commission and do not have a registered charity number. I say that's 99% of my inquiries. I'll come to you in a sec, Simon. And then finally, there is a benefit in including 10% of your estate to charities. So your inheritance tax that you pay is reduced from 40% to 36%. So that is a motivator for some people. If they're asking about inheritance tax, that's usually what they're referring to. But I'd say that is top level, all you really need to know about it. Simon.
We've recently been the beneficiaries of a part of someone's will. And in the will that the solicitor has sent me, because the solicitor is the executor, the gentleman has left two amounts to charitable bodies, and they're listed in the will with their charity registration number. Two PCCs that have benefited from this will, it doesn't say anything about their charitable status. Now, is that something I need to be contacting the executor about, so that we don't get in a muddle about inheritance tax?
I mean, the executor should be aware. Sorry, you went out on the, who's the other two organisations that have been left?
One's the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, and one's the Lincolnshire Agricultural people. But again, both of those are money gifts. Ours is a residuary grant.
Okay. Do you know what percentage is the executor indicated what percentage it is?
Yes, it's 1/8 of the remaining estate.
I mean, it's up to the solicitor. You'd hope that the solicitor would get the inheritance tax reduction right, but I mean, if you've been left 1/8, and you say those other two charitable beneficiaries have also residuary beneficiaries.
No, they're pecuniary beneficiaries. But there's also another PCC who is benefits to the 1/8 of the estate as well. So two PCCs between them get 1/4 of the residuary estate.
Hey Simon, can you send me the will?
Yes, I will do, Eleanor.
Love nosing at people's wills. Yeah, send it across and I can have a better look at it and understand. But I'll put in the chat, there's 2 guides in terms of receiving legacies and what you're sort of, if it's a residuary legacy versus if it's a pecuniary legacy, the requirements on your PCC and how, some of the steps in administering it, because I appreciate once you receive the legacy, if it is residuary, there's lots of things to do, but a nice big chunk of money at the end of it, which is definitely worth, and also repaying someone's incredible generosity. Sorry, I hate ending on this one. It's so dry, but I don't want to put it at the beginning, but this is basically just some of the legalities around will writing, and these are a lot of the queries that come up, so it's always worth highlighting, but don't get too bogged down in it, because I don't want you to go away and research this sort of thing. What I want you to do is to go away to your parish and just take 3 hopefully simple steps in embedding legacy in your giving, and you should start to see an increase in the number of inquiries and or legacies left. The only one I'd add is just about talking about legacies and sharing good news stories as much as you can, because what all these things are trying to do is just normalize legacy giving, and the more we can make it a normal part of giving, the more open people will be to having conversations, the more appealing it might be as an opportunity to support their local church, and I just think the most incredible stories come out of them, and they always lift my spirits, so I can't hear enough of them really. So please go back to your parishes, think about how you can talk about legacies when you're talking about giving. Just make sure that there's information available so people know how to leave a legacy and that they can indeed leave a legacy, and think about that group of people who are leaving legacies. Yes, they're inside your church, but they're also outside of your church, in your community and across the country. And then finally, we have this great offer of free online wills, which won't appeal to everybody, but might be appropriate for some, and they might even include a gift in their will through using the service. So it's there, it's for churches, it's for individuals. It would be great if you could make people aware of it. And then just keep doing it. Just keep thinking about legacies. And if you do that, it will filter down and you will encourage this really important area of giving. I'm going to stop talking. We've got 10 minutes for questions, but also here's Hugo and Andy's details. I've also included the URL here for the National Church of England website. It's got lots of information there for individuals, but also for PCCs. And And I'll stop talking and hand back over to you, Andy.
Eleanor, thank you very much indeed. And just to reiterate the point that Eleanor's making there with that last slide, do please get in touch. If you go away, if anything like me, you'll finish the session thinking, oh, I know all about that now. And a couple of days later, you'll think about it. Oh, what was that? What was that Eleanor said? I can't quite remember. Just get in touch, please. We're here to help you. This is a very important aspect of giving. It's just another form of giving to the church, and we're here to encourage and support you in your efforts to encourage all forms of giving to the church and to move your church community on in terms of the way they perceive these things, the way in which your culture embraces these things as well. So whatever it is, if we can help you in any way at all, either give us a call or drop us an email, or if you prefer, I'll very happy to come and pay you a visit. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for that, and thank you, Eleanor. Do we have? You see, sort of Simon's there has been putting some resources into the chat, which I'll also be sharing with you in an email probably tomorrow. And Eleanor has also put some information there as well, and the guides that she was talking about just now. So, any questions? Nothing in the chat, is there? Anyone else want to stick their hand up? Any other examples you want to share? I'll leave a slightly awkward silence now to flush you out. Okay. So, Rashton, thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, it doesn't sound like there's any questions coming through, but at the risk of repeating myself, we are here to take your inquiries and to answer your calls. Thank you all very much indeed for sharing your time this afternoon, sharing your stories, and for seeing the value in this work. Thank you to Simon for manning the switchboard there. That's great. But as a very special thank you to Eleanor for her time this week and last week in supporting this really important aspect of our work. Eleanor, thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Oh, my throat's gone. You're very welcome.
Otherwise, it just reminds me to say to wish you a very good afternoon. If you're interested, there's even song from Lincoln Cathedral on Radio 3 at 4 o'clock. Otherwise, Godspeed to all of you, and I will be sending the slides and other notes over to you before the end of this week. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, especially Eleanor.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.